a quaint American town, three cousins embark on a summer journey of discovery, unearthing long-buried family secrets in their grandparents' basement. As they delve into a treasure trove of old photographs and letters, Mia, Oliver, and Lucas uncover a tapestry of love, sacrifice, and resilience that spans generations. Their nightly gatherings become a portal to the past, revealing tales of forbidden romance, wartime heroism, and unexpected connections to their town's very foundation. But as they piece together their family's hidden history, they find themselves confronting their own personal challenges and forging unbreakable bonds. Little do they know that their innocent exploration will lead to a shocking revelation that will change their lives forever. What began as a summer pastime evolves into a transformative experience, teaching them the true meaning of family, acceptance, and the power of shared stories. If you love your family and want to listen to amazing and shocking stories, click on subscribe and avoid 20 years of bad luck in your life. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the sleepy town, three cousins made their way to their grandparents' house. Mia, Oliver, and Lucas had fallen into a comfortable routine this summer, eagerly anticipating their nightly rendezvous in the basement. The old wooden stairs creaked under their feet as they descended, the musty scent of aged timber filling their nostrils. The basement was a world unto itself, a repository of family history and forgotten treasures. Mismatched furniture, collected over decades, created a cozy atmosphere. The cousins settled onto well-worn cushions, arranging themselves in a semicircle facing their grandmother, who sat in her favorite rocking chair. "What story will you tell us tonight, Grandma?" Oliver asked, his eyes shining with anticipation. At 14, he was the oldest of the three, but his enthusiasm for these gatherings rivaled that of his younger cousins. Grandma Ellen's eyes twinkled as she leaned forward, her voice taking on a conspiratorial tone. "Tonight, I'll tell you about my childhood during the Great Depression." The cousins leaned in, captivated by the promise of a glimpse into their grandmother's past. As Ellen began her tale, the basement faded away, replaced by vivid images of a hardscrabble life in the 1930s. She painted pictures with her words, of empty cupboards and worn-out shoes, of families banding together to share what little they had. The cousins listened, wide-eyed, as their grandmother described the ingenuity and resilience that saw her family through those tough times. "We may not have had much," Ellen concluded, "but we had each other. And in the end, that's what mattered most." A comfortable silence fell over the basement as the cousins absorbed the story. It was Lucas who broke the spell, his curiosity piqued. "Grandma, do you have any old things from back then?" he asked. Ellen's smile widened. "As a matter of fact, I think there might be a box or two tucked away in the corner. Why don't you kids go take a look?" Excited by the prospect of tangible links to the past, the cousins scrambled to their feet. They made their way to the far corner of the basement, where stacks of boxes and old furniture created a makeshift maze. After a few minutes of searching, Mia's triumphant voice rang out. "I found something," she called, pulling a dust-covered box from beneath an old end table. Oliver and Lucas hurried over, helping Mia carry the heavy box to the center of the room. With trembling hands, they lifted the lid, revealing a treasure trove of memories. Faded photographs, their edges worn and curling, lay atop a pile of yellowed envelopes. "Oh my," Ellen breathed, leaning forward to peer into the box. "I'd forgotten all about these." The cousins carefully began to sift through the contents, handling each item with reverence. They passed around black and white photographs, marveling at the fashions of a bygone era and trying to spot familiar features in the faces of their ancestors. "Look at this one," Oliver said, holding up a photo of a young couple. "Is that you, Grandma?" Ellen took the photo, her eyes misting over with nostalgia. "That's me and your grandfather on our wedding day," she confirmed. "We were so young then, barely older than you are now, Oliver." As they continued to explore the box's contents, Lucas picked up one of the envelopes. "There are letters in here," he announced, carefully extracting a fragile piece of paper. The cousins gathered around as Lucas began to read aloud, his voice stumbling over unfamiliar phrases and elegant handwriting. It was a love letter, passionate and poetic, speaking of a romance that seemed to transcend time itself. As the night wore on, the basement became a cocoon of shared discovery. The cousins took turns reading letters, examining photos, and listening to their grandmother's commentary. With each new revelation, they felt a growing connection not just to their family's past, but to each other. It was well past midnight when they finally packed away the box, reluctantly preparing to head home. But as they climbed the stairs, each cousin knew that this was just the beginning. The dusty box in the basement had opened a door to a world of family secrets and untold stories, and they were determined to uncover them all. The following evening, Mia, Oliver, and Lucas reconvened in the basement with renewed enthusiasm. The box of family mementos sat in the center of their circle, beckoning them to delve deeper into their shared history. Mia reached for one of the letters they hadn't read the night before. Her brow furrowed as she unfolded the delicate paper, its creases well worn from years of handling. As she began to read aloud, her voice filled with growing excitement. "My dearest Margaret," Mia read, her eyes widening. "Another week has passed, and still, I find my thoughts consumed by you. The feud between our families seems more foolish with each passing day. How can they not see that our love transcends their petty grievances?" Oliver and Lucas leaned in, captivated by the unfolding tale. "Margaret," Lucas whispered, "isn't that great-grandma's name?" Mia nodded, her fingers tracing the elegant script. "This letter, it's talking about a family feud and a forbidden love. I had no idea our family had such drama." As the cousins pored over more letters, a story began to take shape. Their great-grandmother Margaret had fallen in love with a young man from a rival family. Their romance had blossomed in secret, conducted through clandestine meetings and passionate letters. "I can't believe they kept this a secret all these years," Oliver mused, shuffling through the stack of photographs. "Do you think Grandma knows about this?" Before anyone could respond, they heard footsteps on the stairs. Their grandmother appeared, a knowing smile on her face. "I see you've discovered Margaret's little romance," she said, settling into her rocking chair. The cousins bombarded her with questions, eager to know more about this hidden chapter of their family history. Ellen held up her hands, chuckling at their enthusiasm. "It's true," she confirmed. "Your great-grandmother Margaret fell in love with a boy from the Johnson family. Back then, our families were locked in a bitter dispute over land boundaries. It was quite the scandal when they were finally caught together." As Ellen recounted the tale of star-crossed lovers and family reconciliation, Lucas found himself deeply affected by the story. His parents' recent separation had left him feeling adrift, questioning the very concept of lasting love. But here, in these yellowed letters and his grandmother's words, he found a glimmer of hope. "So they stayed together?" Lucas asked, his voice small. "Even with everyone against them?" Ellen's eyes softened as she regarded her grandson. "They did, sweetheart. It wasn't easy, but they fought for their love. Sometimes, that's what it takes. The courage to stand up for what you believe in, even when it seems the whole world is against you." Lucas nodded, a weight lifting from his shoulders. If his great-grandparents could overcome such obstacles, maybe there was hope for his own family yet. As the night wore on, the cousins continued to uncover more details about their family's past. They laughed over funny anecdotes, marveled at old family recipes tucked between the pages of letters, and pieced together a family tree that stretched back further than they'd ever imagined. Their animated voices and occasional bursts of laughter didn't go unnoticed. Upstairs, their parents exchanged worried glances. "They've been down there every night this week," Mia's mother said, frowning. "Don't you think we should check on them?" The other adults nodded in agreement, and together they made their way to the basement door. As they descended the stairs, they braced themselves for the worst. Perhaps the kids had stumbled upon some inappropriate content or were up to no good. What they found instead stopped them in their tracks. The three cousins were huddled together, surrounded by old photos and letters, their faces alight with genuine interest and joy as they listened to their grandmother recount tales of their ancestors. "And that's how your great-great-grandfather ended up owning half the apple orchards in the county," Ellen was saying as the parents reached the bottom of the stairs. The children looked up, startled by the sudden appearance of their parents. But instead of guilt or defiance, their faces showed only excitement. "Mom, Dad," Mia exclaimed, "did you know that Great-Grandpa Joe once wrestled a bear?" The parents exchanged bemused glances, caught off guard by the children's enthusiasm for family history. As they settled in to join the impromptu storytelling session, they realized that what they had feared might be a problem was actually bringing the family closer together. As the night drew to a close, the cousins reluctantly packed away the box of memories. But each of them knew that this was just the beginning. They had only scratched the surface of their family's rich history, and they were eager to uncover more. Lucas, in particular, felt a newfound sense of connection to his roots. As he climbed the stairs to head home, he found himself looking at his parents with fresh eyes. Maybe, just maybe, their story wasn't over yet. After all, if his ancestors could overcome feuds and societal pressure, perhaps his own family could navigate their current struggles. With renewed hope and a head full of family lore, Lucas bid goodnight to his cousins. As he drifted off to sleep that night, he dreamed of secret romances, daring adventures, and the unbreakable bonds of family that stretched across generations. The sky opened up one afternoon, rain drumming against the windows of the old house. Mia, Oliver, and Lucas found themselves once again in the basement, but this time with a purpose beyond mere exploration. Inspired by the wealth of stories they had uncovered, they decided to embark on an ambitious project, writing a book about their family history. "We should start with Great-Grandma Margaret's love story," Mia suggested, her fingers flying across the keyboard of her laptop. At 13, she was the family's aspiring writer, always scribbling in notebooks or typing away on her computer. Oliver nodded enthusiastically. "And we can include Grandpa Joe's bear wrestling story too," he added, sketching out a rough timeline on a large piece of paper spread across the floor. Lucas, the youngest at 11, sat cross-legged on an old armchair, flipping through the stack of photos they had discovered. "How about we include some of these pictures?" he asked. "They really bring the stories to life." As the rain continued to pour outside, the cousins lost themselves in their project. They argued good-naturedly about which stories to include, how to structure the book, and who would write which sections. The basement filled with the sound of typing, the rustling of papers, and occasional bursts of laughter as they recalled particularly amusing anecdotes. As they worked, Oliver found himself increasingly drawn to the tales of perseverance and triumph over adversity. He thought about his own struggles at school, the difficulty he had with math, the way some kids teased him about his stutter when he got nervous during presentations. "You know," he said during a lull in their work, "hearing about how our great-grandparents overcame so much, it kind of makes my problems seem small in comparison." Mia looked up from her laptop, her expression softening. "What do you mean?" Oliver hesitated, then plunged ahead. "Well, like how I've been having trouble in math class, and sometimes I get teased about my stutter. But then I think about Great-Grandpa surviving the Depression, or Great-Grandma Margaret standing up to her whole family for love. It makes me feel like I can handle my stuff too, you know?" Lucas nodded vigorously. "Totally. It's like, if they could do all that, we can do anything." Mia smiled, reaching out to squeeze Oliver's hand. "That's a great way to look at it. Maybe we should include a section in the book about how their stories inspire us today." As they resumed their work with renewed enthusiasm, Mia found herself reflecting on her own challenges. She had always put immense pressure on herself to excel academically, often staying up late to study and fretting over every test score. The stress had been taking its toll, leaving her feeling constantly anxious and overwhelmed. "Guys," she said hesitantly, "can I tell you something?" Oliver and Lucas looked up, sensing the seriousness in her tone. "I've been really stressed about school lately," Mia admitted. "I feel like I have to be perfect all the time, and it's kind of crushing me." There was a moment of silence as her cousins absorbed this information. Then Lucas spoke up, his voice uncharacteristically serious. "You don't have to be perfect, Mia," he said. "Look at all the people in our family history. They made mistakes, they faced challenges, but they kept going. That's what matters." Oliver nodded in agreement. "Yeah, and you're already amazing. You're smart and kind, and you're writing most of this book. You don't need to stress yourself out trying to be even more perfect." Mia felt tears prick at her eyes, touched by her cousin's support. "Thanks, guys," she said softly. "I guess we're all dealing with our own stuff, huh?" As the afternoon wore on, their conversation turned from the past to the present. They shared their fears and insecurities, offering each other support and encouragement. By the time the rain began to let up, they had not only made significant progress on their book, but had also forged a deeper bond with each other. "Hey," Oliver said as they were packing up for the day, "what if we make a pact to always support each other no matter what, like our ancestors did?" Mia and Lucas agreed enthusiastically. They put their hands together in the center of their circle, making a solemn vow to always be there for each other, to share their burdens, and to draw strength from their shared history. As they emerged from the basement, blinking in the sudden sunlight, breaking through the clouds, each of them felt a newfound sense of connection, not just to their family's past, but to each other, and to their own potential to overcome whatever challenges lay ahead. The book project had become more than just a record of their family's history. It was a testament to their own resilience, a reminder that they too were part of a long line of survivors and dreamers. And as they parted ways that evening, each cousin carried with them a sense of belonging and purpose that hadn't been there before. Little did they know that their journey of discovery was far from over. The basement still held secrets waiting to be uncovered, and the summer had many more surprises in store for them. The next afternoon, the cousins reconvened in the basement, eager to continue their family history project. As they settled into their usual spots, Lucas reached for a stack of photos they hadn't yet sorted through. He began flipping through them idly, half listening to Mia and Oliver's debate about how to structure the next chapter of their book. Suddenly, Lucas froze, his eyes widening as he stared at a particular photograph. "Guys," he said, his voice trembling slightly, "you need to see this." Mia and Oliver crowded around him, peering at the faded black and white image in his hands. It showed a young man in his early 20s, dressed in the fashion of the 1940s, leaning against an old car with a confident smile. "That looks exactly like my dad," Lucas whispered, his finger tracing the outline of the man's face. Oliver squinted at the photo. "Are you sure? It looks pretty old." "I'm telling you, it's like looking at a picture of my dad from the future," Lucas insisted. "But that's impossible, right?" Mia gently took the photo from Lucas, examining it closely. "Look at the back," she said, turning it over. In faded pencil, someone had written, "Thomas, 1943. "Thomas?" Oliver echoed. "Isn't that your great-grandfather's name, Lucas?" Lucas nodded slowly, his mind racing. He'd always known he was named after his great-grandfather, but he'd never seen a picture of the man as a young adult. The resemblance to his father was uncanny, almost eerie. A mixture of excitement and unease, settled over the group. This discovery added a new layer of mystery to their family history project, and they were eager to learn more. "We need to ask Grandma about this," Mia declared. The others agreed, and they quickly made their way upstairs to find their grandmother. They found Ellen in the kitchen, preparing a batch of her famous oatmeal cookies. She listened patiently as the cousins, talking over each other in their excitement, explained their discovery and showed her the photograph. Ellen's eyes widened as she looked at the image. "Oh my," she said softly. "I haven't seen this picture in years. Yes, that's your great-grandfather Thomas, Lucas. The resemblance to your father is remarkable, isn't it?" "But who was he really?" Lucas pressed. "We don't know much about him, except that I'm named after him." Ellen's expression grew serious. "Well, children, every family has its secrets, and Thomas, he had quite a few." The cousins leaned in, sensing they were on the brink of uncovering something significant. Ellen sighed, then began to speak, her voice taking on the familiar cadence of a storyteller. "Thomas, your great-grandfather, had a rather colorful past," she began. "He wasn't always the upstanding citizen he later became. In his youth, he ran with a rough crowd, got into all sorts of trouble." Lucas felt a knot forming in his stomach. He'd always been proud of his name, thinking it connected him to a line of honorable men. Now, he wasn't so sure. Ellen continued, "But that all changed when he met your great-grandmother, Sarah. She saw the good in him, believed in him when no one else did. For her, he turned his life around completely." The kitchen fell silent as the cousins absorbed this information. It was Mia who finally spoke up. "So, he was a bad guy who became good? For love?" Ellen smiled gently. "Life isn't always black and white, dear. Thomas made mistakes, yes, but he also had the courage to change. That's a kind of strength too, you know." Lucas felt a mix of emotions swirling inside him. Part of him was disappointed to learn about his great-grandfather's troubled past, but another part was oddly relieved. It made Thomas seem more human, more real. "What kind of trouble did he get into?" Oliver asked, curiosity overtaking his initial shock. Ellen hesitated, clearly weighing how much to reveal. "Well, let's just say he had some run-ins with the law. Petty theft mostly. But after he met Sarah, he not only stopped his criminal activities, but also worked to make amends for his past actions." As Ellen shared more details about Thomas's journey from troublemaker to respected member of the community, the cousins found themselves drawn into a tale of redemption and second chances. They learned how Thomas had worked tirelessly to earn the trust of those he'd wronged, how he'd become a pillar of support for other young men looking to turn their lives around. Lucas, in particular, felt a growing sense of connection to his great-grandfather. He thought about his own struggles, the times he'd made mistakes and feared he couldn't make things right. Thomas's story gave him hope that it was never too late to change, to become a better person. As the afternoon wore on, the cousins peppered Ellen with questions, eager to learn every detail about Thomas and his transformation. They scribbled notes furiously, knowing this would form a crucial chapter in their family history book. When they finally returned to the basement, laden with plates of Ellen's cookies, they looked at their project with fresh eyes. The family tree they'd been constructing seemed more vibrant now, filled not just with names and dates, but with real people who had faced challenges, made mistakes, and ultimately triumphed. "You know," Mia said thoughtfully, munching on a cookie, "I think this is the most important story we've uncovered yet. It's not just about the past. It's about how people can change, how love can transform us." Oliver nodded in agreement. "It makes me look at our whole family differently. I wonder what other secrets we might uncover." Lucas sat quietly, still processing everything he'd learned about his namesake. He felt a new sense of responsibility, a desire to live up to the better part of Thomas's legacy. "I think," he said slowly, that this is what our book should really be about. Not just the good stuff, but the hard times too. How our family faced challenges and came out stronger. As they settled back into their work, the basement hummed with a new energy. The cousins had stumbled upon a truth that would shape not just their book, but their understanding of family, forgiveness, and the complex tapestry of human nature. And as they wrote, they couldn't help but wonder what other revelations lay hidden in the dusty corners of their family's past. As their summer project progressed, the cousins' enthusiasm for their family history grew exponentially. Mia, always the organizer, had an idea that would take their exploration to the next level. "What if we host a storytelling night?" she suggested one afternoon as they worked in the basement. "We could invite our parents, aunts, uncles, and maybe even some of the neighbors who've known our family for years." Oliver's eyes lit up. "That's brilliant. We could share some of the stories we've uncovered and maybe even learn some new ones." Lucas nodded enthusiastically, already envisioning the event. "We could set up here in the basement. It's got the perfect atmosphere for storytelling." The cousins spent the next week preparing for their big night. They cleaned up the basement, arranging chairs and cushions in a semicircle. Mia strung up fairy lights to create a warm, inviting ambiance. Oliver put together a playlist of soft, instrumental music to play in the background. Lucas, with his artistic flair, created beautiful hand-drawn invitations for each guest. As the evening of the event arrived, the cousins felt a mixture of excitement and nervousness. They had worked hard on their presentation, carefully selecting which stories to share and practicing their delivery. The basement slowly filled with family members and curious neighbors, all intrigued by the promise of uncovering long-buried family tales. Mia stepped forward to begin the evening, her voice only slightly shaky as she welcomed everyone. "Thank you all for coming," she said. "We've spent this summer discovering amazing stories about our family, and we wanted to share them with you." As the cousins took turns narrating tales of love, loss, adventure, and perseverance, their audience listened with rapt attention. There were gasps of surprise, bursts of laughter, and more than a few teary eyes as the rich tapestry of their family history unfolded. When they reached the story of Thomas, Lucas's great-grandfather, Lucas felt a lump form in his throat. He glanced at his father, wondering how he would react to hearing about his grandfather's checkered past. To Lucas's surprise, his father nodded encouragingly, a look of pride in his eyes. Emboldened, Lucas launched into the tale, his voice growing stronger as he recounted Thomas's journey from troubled youth to respected community member. As the evening progressed, something unexpected began to happen. Inspired by the cousins' stories, other family members started to share their own memories and anecdotes. Aunt Sarah revealed a hilarious mishap from her college days that had never been spoken of before. Uncle Jim, usually so quiet, told a touching story about how he and his wife met. Mia found herself deeply moved by the experience. As she listened to the stories swirling around her, she realized that every member of her family had faced challenges, just like she was facing now with her academic pressure. The strength and resilience she saw in her ancestors and relatives made her own struggles seem more manageable. She thought about the intense pressure she put on herself to excel in school, the sleepless nights spent studying, the anxiety that gnawed at her before every test. But now, hearing about her great-grandmother who had pursued an education despite societal obstacles, or her uncle who had bounced back from business failure to build a successful career, Mia felt a shift in her perspective. These people, her people, hadn't achieved greatness by being perfect. They had stumbled, made mistakes, faced setbacks, but they had persevered. Mia realized that it wasn't about being flawless. It was about continuing to move forward, to learn and grow. As the evening drew to a close, Mia stepped forward once more. With a deep breath, she shared something she hadn't planned to. "I want to thank everyone for being here tonight," she began. "Hearing all these stories has made me realize something important. I've been putting so much pressure on myself to be perfect, especially in school. But our family history shows that it's not about being perfect. It's about trying our best, learning from our mistakes, and supporting each other." Her words were met with nods of understanding and murmurs of encouragement. Mia's parents exchanged worried glances, realizing they hadn't fully understood the pressure their daughter had been under. Oliver, seeing Mia's courage, felt inspired to share his own struggles. He talked about his difficulties in math and his stutter, and how learning about their ancestors' resilience had given him new confidence. Lucas, too, opened up about his feelings regarding his parents' separation, drawing parallels to the challenges their ancestors had faced in their relationships. As the cousins bared their souls, a palpable sense of connection filled the room. Family members and neighbors alike shared words of support and their own experiences, creating a warm atmosphere of understanding and acceptance. The storytelling night had become more than just a recounting of family history. It had turned into a powerful bonding experience, bridging generations and fostering a sense of belonging and mutual support. As the guests began to leave, offering heartfelt thanks and hugs, the cousins felt a mix of exhaustion and exhilaration. They had taken a risk in sharing not just their family's past, but their own present struggles, and the response had been overwhelmingly positive. Mia, Oliver, and Lucas lingered in the basement after everyone had gone, basking in the afterglow of the successful event. They realized that their summer project had evolved into something far more significant than they had initially imagined. It wasn't just about uncovering old stories. It was about understanding themselves and their place within the larger narrative of their family. As they tidied up the basement, putting away chairs and turning off the fairy lights, they felt a renewed sense of purpose. Their book would not just be a collection of historical anecdotes, but a living document that connected past and present, highlighting the enduring strength of family bonds across generations. With tired but contented smiles, the cousins made plans to meet again the next day. They had more stories to write, more connections to make, and a newfound appreciation for the complex, beautiful tapestry of their family history. The day after the storytelling night, the cousins reconvened in the basement, their usual excitement tempered by a thoughtful mood. The events of the previous evening had left them with much to process. "I can't believe how well it went," Mia said, absently fiddling with a strand of leftover fairy lights. "I was so nervous about sharing my struggles, but everyone was so supportive." Oliver nodded, a small smile playing on his lips. "Yeah, it felt good to talk about my stutter and math troubles. I didn't realize how much I'd been bottling up." Lucas, however, remained uncharacteristically quiet. He sat on the old armchair, hugging his knees to his chest, a pensive look on his face. Mia and Oliver exchanged concerned glances. "Lucas," Mia ventured gently, "are you okay? You've been awfully quiet." Lucas took a deep breath, his eyes fixed on a point in the distance. "I've been thinking about what I said last night, about Mom and Dad's separation." Oliver moved closer, placing a comforting hand on his younger cousin's shoulder. "What about it?" "I don't know," Lucas said, his voice barely above a whisper. "It's just, hearing all those stories about our ancestors overcoming challenges, it made me wonder if maybe there's still hope for my parents." The basement fell silent as Mia and Oliver absorbed Lucas's words. They knew how deeply the separation had affected their young cousin, but this was the first time he'd openly expressed any hope about the situation. Mia sat down on the arm of Lucas's chair. "Have you talked to your parents about how you're feeling?" Lucas shook his head. "I'm scared," he admitted. "What if they tell me there's no chance? What if it just makes things worse?" Oliver squeezed Lucas's shoulder. "But what if it helps? Remember Great-Grandpa Thomas's story? how he turned his life around when everyone thought it was impossible. Oliver's right, Mia chimed in. And think about all the other stories we've uncovered. Our family has faced so many challenges, but they always found a way through. Lucas looked up at his cousins, his eyes shimmering with unshed tears. You really think I should talk to them? Mia and Oliver nodded in unison. We'll be right here for you, no matter what happens, Mia assured him. Emboldened by his cousin's support, Lucas took out his phone. With trembling fingers, he sent a text to both his parents, asking if they could all talk when he got home. As they waited for a response, the cousins fell into a deep conversation about their own fears and hopes. Oliver opened up about his anxiety over starting high school in the fall, while Mia shared her worries about maintaining her grades without burning out. You know, Oliver said thoughtfully, I think this project has changed us. We're not just learning about our family history, we're learning how to face our own challenges. Mia nodded in agreement. It's like we're carrying the strength of all those who came before us. Their stories are becoming part of our story. Just then, Lucas's phone buzzed. He read the message, a mix of anxiety and hope crossing his face. They both agreed to talk, he said, his voice a mixture of relief and apprehension. Mia and Oliver enveloped Lucas in a group hug, offering words of encouragement and support. As they pulled apart, Lucas looked at his cousins with gratitude. Thank you, he said softly. I don't think I could have done this without you guys. As Lucas prepared to leave, Mia and Oliver promised to be available if he needed to talk later. They watched their younger cousin climb the basement stairs, his shoulders set with a new determination. After Lucas left, Mia and Oliver remained in the basement, the weight of the moment settling over them. They realized that their summer project had become more than just a book about family history. It had become a journey of self-discovery, a source of strength, and a catalyst for change in their lives. Do you think he'll be okay? Oliver asked, concern evident in his voice. Mia nodded slowly. I think so. Lucas is stronger than he knows, and no matter what happens, he's got us. As they began to pack up for the day, both cousins felt a renewed sense of purpose. Their family history book was no longer just a record of the past. It was a guide for navigating their present and shaping their future. They made plans to meet again the next day, eager to continue their work, but also anxious to hear how Lucas's conversation with his parents had gone. As they left the basement, they carried with them not just the stories of their ancestors, but a deeper understanding of themselves and the unbreakable bonds of family that connected them all. The summer that had started as a simple exploration of old photos and letters had become a transformative experience, teaching them lessons about resilience, hope, and the enduring power of family ties. And as they stepped out into the warm afternoon sun, Mia and Oliver knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together, armed with the wisdom and strength of generations. The next day, Mia and Oliver arrived at the basement early, anxiously awaiting Lucas's arrival. When he finally appeared at the top of the stairs, his expression was unreadable. How did it go? Mia asked tentatively as Lucas settled into his usual spot. Lucas took a deep breath. It was intense, but good, I think. We talked for hours. They listened to how I felt, and they both promised to try counseling again. Oliver and Mia exchanged relieved glances. That's great news, Lucas, Oliver said, giving his cousin a supportive pat on the back. Yeah, Lucas nodded, a small smile forming. It's not fixed, but it feels like a start. And I don't think I would have had the courage to speak up if it wasn't for all we've learned this summer. The cousins spent the next hour discussing Lucas's conversation with his parents, offering support, and sharing their own experiences with family communication. As the conversation wound down, they turned their attention back to their family history project. So, where were we? Mia asked, Flipping through her notebook, Oliver reached for the box of old documents they had been sorting through. "I think we were about to go through this last batch of letters," he said, pulling out a handful of yellowed envelopes. As they began to sift through the letters, Lucas noticed something odd. "Hey guys, look at this," he said, holding up an envelope. "The handwriting on this one is different from the others." Mia took the envelope, examining it closely. "You're right, and look at the date. It's much more recent than the rest." Intrigued, they carefully opened the envelope. Inside was a single sheet of paper, covered in cramped, hurried writing. As they read, their eyes widened in surprise. "No way!" Oliver breathed. "This can't be real." The letter, dated just 15 years ago, was from their grandfather to their grandmother. In it, he spoke of a great secret that he had kept hidden for decades, one that could change everything if revealed. "What do you think it means?" Lucas asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Mia shook her head, her mind racing. "I don't know, but it sounds big. Should we ask Grandma about it?" The cousins debated for a while, torn between their curiosity and their respect for their grandparents' privacy. Finally, they decided to do a bit more investigating on their own before approaching their grandmother. They returned to the box, searching for any other documents that might shed light on the mysterious secret. After an hour of careful examination, they found a few more cryptic references in other letters, but nothing concrete. "Wait a second," Oliver said suddenly. "Remember that old house we passed on the way to the park last week? The one Grandma said used to belong to our family?" Mia's eyes lit up with recognition. "The abandoned one?" "Yeah. What about it?" "What if—" Oliver hesitated, then plunged ahead. "What if there's something there, related to this secret?" The idea was far-fetched, but the more they discussed it, the more plausible it seemed. They remembered their grandmother's odd reaction when they had asked about the old house, a mix of nostalgia and what now seemed like poorly concealed anxiety. "Should we go check it out?" Lucas asked, a hint of excitement creeping into his voice. Mia bit her lip, considering. "It could be dangerous. That house looked pretty run down." "We'll be careful," Oliver assured her. "And we'll stick together. Come on, Mia. Aren't you curious?" After a bit more deliberation, they agreed to visit the old house the next day. They spent the rest of the afternoon planning their expedition, making sure to pack flashlights, water, and first aid supplies. As they left the basement that evening, each cousin felt a mixture of excitement and apprehension. They were on the brink of uncovering a family secret that had been buried for decades. What would they find in that old, abandoned house? And how would it change their understanding of their family history? That night, as they lay in their beds, their minds raced with possibilities. The summer that had started as a simple exploration of old photos and letters had taken an unexpected turn. They were no longer just chroniclers of their family's past. They had become detectives, unraveling a mystery that spanned generations. As sleep finally claimed them, each cousin dreamed of hidden treasures, long-lost relatives, and the tantalizing secret that awaited them in the dusty rooms of an abandoned house. Little did they know that their discovery the next day would shake the very foundations of their family's history and change their lives forever. The next morning dawned bright and clear, a stark contrast to the nervous energy that thrummed through the cousins as they met at their designated spot. Armed with backpacks filled with supplies, they set off towards the old abandoned house that had once belonged to their family. As they approached the dilapidated structure, its weathered facade looming before them, Mia felt a shiver run down her spine. "Are we sure about this?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Oliver nodded resolutely. "We've come this far. We need to know the truth." Lucas, the youngest but often the bravest, took the lead. He carefully pushed open the creaky front door, wincing at the loud groan it made. The cousins stepped inside, the musty smell of decay and neglect assaulting their senses. They moved cautiously through the house, their flashlight beams cutting through the gloom. Dust motes danced in the shafts of sunlight that managed to penetrate the grimy windows. The rooms were mostly empty, save for a few pieces of broken furniture and tattered curtains. "Look for anything that seems out of place," Mia instructed, her eyes scanning the peeling wallpaper for any hidden compartments or clues. They searched room after room, their initial excitement slowly giving way to disappointment. Just as they were about to give up, Lucas called out from what appeared to be an old study. "Guys, come here, I found something." Mia and Oliver rushed to join him. Lucas was kneeling in front of an old fireplace, running his hands along the bricks. "This one's loose," he explained, wiggling a brick near the back of the fireplace. Together, they managed to pry the brick free. Behind it was a small cavity, and nestled inside was a metal box about the size of a thick book. With trembling hands, Mia lifted the box out of its hiding place. It was locked, but the lock was old and rusted. After a bit of effort, they managed to pry it open. Inside, they found a collection of documents, old letters, newspaper clippings, and what looked like official records. But it was a leather-bound journal that caught their attention. On its cover, in faded gold lettering, was the name Thomas Everett. "That's my great-grandfather's name," Lucas breathed, his eyes wide with shock. They opened the journal carefully, its pages brittle with age. As they began to read, the true nature of their family's secret began to unfold before their eyes. Thomas Everett, it turned out, wasn't just a local hero who had helped found their town. He had been instrumental in uncovering and stopping a major corruption scandal that had threatened to destroy the community in its early days. The journal detailed how Thomas had worked tirelessly, often at great personal risk, to gather evidence against corrupt officials who were embezzling funds meant for the town's development. It spoke of late-night meetings, clandestine investigations, and narrow escapes from those who wanted to keep their crimes hidden. But the most shocking revelation came near the end of the journal. Thomas revealed that he had been forced to assume a new identity to protect his family from retribution. The man they knew as Thomas Everett had originally been born under a different name in a different state. "This is incredible," Oliver murmured as they finished reading. "Our great-grandfather was like a real-life superhero, fighting corruption and protecting the town." Mia nodded, her mind reeling from the implications. "But why keep it a secret for so long? Why didn't our grandparents tell us?" Lucas flipped through the remaining documents in the box. "Look at this," he said, holding up a yellowed newspaper clipping. "It says some of the corrupt officials were never caught. Maybe the danger never really went away." The cousins sat in stunned silence, surrounded by the dust and shadows of the old house, trying to process the magnitude of their discovery. Their family's history, which they thought they had been uncovering all summer, suddenly seemed to have hidden depths they had never imagined. "What do we do now?" Lucas asked, looking from Mia to Oliver. Mia took a deep breath, her decision-making skills kicking in. "We need to talk to Grandma and Grandpa. They deserve to know what we've found, and we need to understand why they kept this secret for so long." Oliver and Lucas nodded in agreement. Carefully, they packed the documents back into the metal box and made their way out of the old house, each lost in their own thoughts. As they walked back home, the weight of their discovery settled over them. They had set out to write a simple family history book, but had instead uncovered a tale of heroism, sacrifice, and long-buried secrets. Their great-grandfather's story wasn't just a footnote in local history. It was a legacy of courage and integrity that had shaped their town and their family for generations. The cousins realized that their summer project had become something far more significant than they could have ever imagined. As they approached their grandparents' house, box of secrets in hand, they knew that the conversation they were about to have would change everything. The true story of their family was about to be revealed, and with it, a new chapter in their own lives was about to begin. The walk back to their grandparents' house felt both endless and all too short. Mia, Oliver, and Lucas moved in silence, each lost in their own thoughts about the magnitude of their discovery. The metal box, cradled carefully in Mia's arms, seemed to grow heavier with each step. As they approached the familiar porch, Lucas hesitated. "Are we really ready for this?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Oliver placed a reassuring hand on his younger cousin's shoulder. "We have to be. Our family deserves to know the truth." Mia nodded in agreement, then took a deep breath and knocked on the door. A moment later, their grandmother Ellen answered, her warm smile faltering slightly as she took in their serious expressions. "Is everything all right, dears?" she asked, ushering them inside. "Grandma?" Mia began, her voice steady despite her nerves. "We need to talk to you and Grandpa. It's important." Ellen's eyes flickered to the metal box in Mia's arms, a flash of recognition and what might have been fear crossing her face. "I'll get your grandfather," she said quietly, disappearing into the house. Moments later, they were all seated in the living room. The cousins sat together on the couch, facing their grandparents in their usual armchairs. The atmosphere was tense, filled with unspoken questions and long-held secrets. Mia took the lead, carefully explaining their discovery of the hidden letter, their expedition to the old house, and finally, the contents of the metal box. As she spoke, she watched her grandparents' reactions closely. Their grandfather's face remained impassive, but their grandmother's eyes filled with tears. When Mia finished, there was a long moment of silence. Finally, their grandfather cleared his throat. "We always knew this day might come," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "We had hoped. Well, I suppose it doesn't matter what we hoped. You deserve to know the truth." Over the next few hours, their grandparents filled in the gaps of the story. They explained how Thomas Everett, or rather, the man who had taken that name, had continued to protect the town long after the initial corruption scandal. His work had made powerful enemies, and the threat to his family had never truly disappeared. "We kept the secret to protect you," Ellen said, reaching out to clasp her husband's hand. "But perhaps we were wrong to keep you in the dark for so long." As the full story unfolded, the cousins found themselves overwhelmed by a mix of emotions: pride in their great-grandfather's courage, awe at the sacrifices made by their family, and a deep sense of connection to a legacy they had never known they possessed. "But why tell us now?" Lucas asked, his voice small. "Why leave the clues for us to find?" Their grandfather smiled sadly. "Your great-grandfather believed that the truth should never stay buried forever. He left instructions for us to reveal the secret when the time was right. When you kids started your family history project, well, we thought maybe it was time." Oliver leaned forward, his eyes bright with curiosity. "So what happens now? Do we tell everyone?" The room fell silent as they all considered the implications. It was Mia who finally spoke up. "I think," she said slowly, "that this is bigger than just our family. Great-Grandpa Thomas fought to make this town a better place. Maybe it's our turn to continue that legacy." Her words seemed to break a dam. Suddenly, everyone was talking at once, discussing the possibilities, the risks, and the potential impact of revealing the truth. As the conversation flowed, the tension in the room gradually eased, replaced by a sense of shared purpose and understanding. As the evening wore on, they began to form a plan. They would carefully document the entire story, using the journal and other evidence they had found. They would consult with a lawyer to understand any legal implications, and then, when they were ready, they would share their great-grandfather's story with the town, honoring his legacy and perhaps inspiring a new generation to stand up against corruption and injustice. It was well past midnight when the cousins finally prepared to leave. As they stood at the door, their grandmother pulled them into a tight hug. "I'm so proud of you all," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "You've shown wisdom and courage beyond your years. Your great-grandfather would have been honored to see how you've carried on his legacy." As they walked home under the starry sky, the cousins felt a profound sense of change. Their summer project had evolved into something far greater than they could have ever imagined. They had uncovered not just their family's past, but a calling for their future. "You know," Oliver said thoughtfully, "I think this is just the beginning of our story." Mia and Lucas nodded in agreement. They knew that the path ahead would not be easy, but they were ready to face whatever challenges came their way. Together, they would honor their great-grandfather's legacy and write the next chapter in their family's remarkable history. As they parted ways for the night, each cousin felt a mix of excitement and trepidation about what the future held. But they also felt a deep sense of connection to each other, to their family's past, and to the community they now knew they were destined to serve. The summer that had started with old photos and dusty letters had become a journey of discovery, growth, and purpose. And as they drifted off to sleep that night, each cousin knew that their lives would never be the same again. The following days were a whirlwind of activity for Mia, Oliver, and Lucas. Their discovery had set in motion a series of events that would change not only their lives, but potentially the entire town. They spent countless hours in the basement, meticulously documenting every detail of their great-grandfather's story, cross-referencing the journal entries with historical records and the additional documents they had found. As they worked, the cousins found themselves growing even closer, their bond strengthened by the weight of the secret they now shared. They also noticed a change in their relationships with their parents and grandparents. The adults, relieved that the long-held secret was finally out in the open, became more open about other aspects of their family history. One evening, as the family gathered for dinner, an unexpected visitor arrived. The doorbell rang, and when Grandma Ellen opened the door, she let out a small gasp of surprise. "James?" she said, her voice trembling slightly. "What are you doing here?" A tall, distinguished-looking man with salt and pepper hair stood on the porch, a hesitant smile on his face. "Hello, Ellen," he said softly. "I hope I'm not intruding." The cousins exchanged confused glances as their grandmother ushered the stranger into the living room. It was their grandfather who finally broke the tension. "Kids," he said, his voice steady, but with an undercurrent of emotion. "This is your great-uncle James. He's your grandfather Thomas's son." A shocked silence fell over the room. Mia was the first to find her voice. "But we didn't know Grandpa Thomas had another son," she said, looking from her grandparents to the newcomer. James smiled sadly. "That's because I've been in hiding for most of my life," he explained. "When I was young, there was a threat against our family. Dad, your great-grandfather, decided it was safer if I disappeared. I've been living under an assumed name ever since." As James shared his story, the cousins listened in awe. He spoke of growing up knowing the truth about his father's heroism, but unable to claim his true identity. He told them about the coded messages he and his parents had exchanged over the years, always careful to maintain the illusion of separation. "But why come back now?" Lucas asked, his eyes wide with curiosity. James reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. "I received this a few days ago," he said, handing it to Ellen. "It's in Dad's handwriting." Ellen unfolded the paper with trembling hands and read it aloud. It was a letter, written years ago but only recently delivered, instructing James to return home when he received word that the family secret had been uncovered. "He knew," Ellen said, her voice filled with wonder. "Somehow Thomas knew that someday the truth would come out, and he wanted the family to be whole again, when it did. As the evening progressed, the living room buzzed with conversation. James shared stories about his life in hiding, filling in gaps in the family history that even the grandparents hadn't known. The cousins, in turn, told him about their summer project and the journey that had led them to uncover the long-buried secret. As midnight approached, Mia, Oliver, and Lucas found themselves sitting on the porch steps, trying to process everything that had happened. "It's like something out of a movie," Oliver said, shaking his head in disbelief. Mia nodded, her mind racing with the implications of James's return. "This changes everything," she said. "Not just our family history book, but everything." Lucas, who had been quiet for most of the evening, finally spoke up. "You know what I think?" he said, his voice filled with determination. "I think this is exactly what Great-Grandpa Thomas wanted. He left all those clues, arranged for James to come back. He was setting the stage for us." "Setting the stage for what?" Oliver asked. "For us to finish what he started," Lucas replied. "To make things right, to tell the whole story, to show everyone what real courage and integrity look like." Mia and Oliver exchanged glances, feeling the weight of Lucas's words. They realized that their summer project had become something far greater than they could have ever imagined. It wasn't just about uncovering the past. It was about shaping the future. As the first light of dawn began to streak the sky, the cousins made a pact. They would work with James and the rest of their family to bring the full story to light. They would honor their great-grandfather's legacy not just by telling his story, but by living up to the example he had set. The book they had set out to write would still be written, but it would be more than just a family history. It would be a call to action, a reminder that one person's courage could ripple through generations and change countless lives. As they headed back inside, exhausted but exhilarated, the cousins knew that their journey was far from over. In fact, it was just beginning. The summer that had started with dusty photographs and faded letters had become the prologue to the most important story they would ever tell. Their own. With renewed purpose and the strength of their newly expanded family behind them, Mia, Oliver, and Lucas stepped into a new chapter of their lives. They were no longer just children exploring their family's past. They were the guardians of a powerful legacy and the authors of their family's future. As they fell into their beds that morning, each cousin felt a mix of excitement and responsibility. They had uncovered a family secret, reunited long-lost relatives, and discovered a calling that would shape their lives for years to come. The summer was drawing to a close, but their real adventure was just beginning.